The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, hello everybody and welcome to Conscious Capitalism San Diego's Conscious Content Friday Live. So if you are an attendee on this webinar, as we get started there, what would really help a lot is if you go to the questions. Actually, you can ask a question anytime, but for right now what we're going to do is in your questions, it's on your little GoToWebinar fold out, the little application, and just type in if you can hear this okay, because we want to make sure that the audio is coming through clearly and that you can hear this. So if you are an attendee, just click on the questions, ask a question, and your question is going to be, I can hear you. I hope that's the question. We would just want to make sure we're coming through loud and clear. And okay, great. Thank you for that feedback. And it's great to know everybody can ask questions because we want you to ask as many questions as you can because we have some great experts on and within a very important topic to a lot of people out there. And we have great concepts and context as well as real life examples that they've been through, because the great thing is they're experts and they have a wealth of real life knowledge because they do this every day. And we want you to get your questions answered as well, because that's the most fun for us and that's how you get the most value. So ask whatever you want as questions. We may not get to it right away. We may wait till there's a stop, or we may till it's relevant, but it's my job to field those questions for you. And who am I? I'm R. Michael Anderson. I'm the president of Conscious Capitalism San Diego. We are the local branch of the Conscious Capitalism International Movement started by John Mackey and Rod Sisodi with their groundbreaking book, Conscious Capitalism. And we have what's called Conscious Content Friday Live, which was started by our board member, Corey, who was just a wonderful, great person. And it was originally Updates, and we thought, hey, let's give our members and our everybody associated with us some additional value. So here we have Conscious Content Friday Live, which is taking place today as this webinar. And we're really excited who we have here because we have Barbera Law Firm, Barbera Corporate Law. And what that is, and we have two representatives. First, we have the principal, Francesco Barbera. He's a Harvard Law graduate and a corporate attorney, and he's the founder of Corporate Law. He has over 14 years with firms of all different types, all different sizes, of doing exactly what we're going to talk about here. He's also, what's very unique about him is he's the co-chair of Conscious Capitalism Los Angeles, so he's part of our tribe, and he's a graduate of a very special university called the University of Santa Monica, and that's how I got to know him. He's a close personal friend. We both have a spiritual psychology degree, and what spiritual psychology is, that's the psychology of love and happiness. So I know it's blowing your mind that we actually have a corporate attorney that knows the psychology of love and happiness, but that's what we're all about here at Conscious Capitalism. So Francesco, thank you so much for giving your time to this webinar.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and it's a topic that's close to my heart and a community that I love supporting.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And I'm really thrilled to have, thrilled to have my colleague Jenny here too. I'll let you introduce her.
Yes, and Francesco said, hey, we want to give as much value we can to all the listeners out there. So we also have Jenny Casson, who's from Northern California, and she's of counsel of Barbera Corporate Law. And she has a master's degree in city and regional planning from UC Berkeley, as well as her JD from Yale Law School. She served some very interesting things she's done in her life. She served as co-founder and CEO for Cutting Edge Capital, a consulting firm that helps socially conscious organizations raise capital. And also in 2010, she co-founded the Sustainable Economics Law Center, and she was involved in the crowdfunding exemption, which ultimately led to the passage of the Federal Jobs Act. So a lot of us know about Kickstarter and some of those other those websites that you can raise capital. Well, she was instrumental in that legislation, which and we're really happy to have her here. So Jenny, thanks so much for being here as well.
Thank you so much for having me. And just so you know, I am involved in the Conscious Capitalism chapter up in the Bay Area.
Absolutely, that's great. I mean, as California, oftentimes we find ourselves so often on the cutting edge of things. So we have pretty much all of California covered today. So it's really good. So just one or two more points of introduction before we jump into the content, and I'm going to let the experts take over here very soon. We want to talk about our corporate partners, and what's unique about the corporate partners in Conscious Capitalism San Diego is we're really engaged on them in many levels, and they are vetted in to become corporate partners. So you have some confidence when they're partnered with us that they are a conscious organization. Mark Irwin, who's a phenomenal, again, a University of Santa Monica graduate who's a financial advisor. He's been very, very instrumental in these early times of our chapter, because our chapter is less than a year old. Real Office Centers, who Ron is just a very conscious leader at Real Office Centers, and if you are a growing organization looking for that next step, you want to get out of your home office and into I don't want to use incubator is not the right word, but there's a serviced office. Companies like Uber has been in there through their progression. That's what Real Office Centers does. Tiny Frog Technologies does our website and all our technologies. And Michael Bruce, he's actually on our board. If you're looking for technologies like a website, search engine optimization, it's great to work with these conscious companies that are doing some things that can be difficult. Ford Mance Capital Advisors, Robert Ford Mance, who's really on the cutting edge of some real estate, conscious real estate in San Diego. And then good old WD-40. We all know WD-40. They make that the famous lubrication. They are based in San Diego, and they have a very, very conscious culture and leadership there. So I just want to give a shout out to and of course, Barbera Corporate Law. And the last thing I'll say before we get into the meat of the presentation is Francesco said, hey, it's great that we're corporate partners, but how can I give value? Just besides being a partner and being in support in the different ways that I am, I want to give direct value to your members. And so as an attorney in this social space, why don't we do two webinars? And they're the two most asked questions that come to me as this corporate attorney. And so the first one, the one we did last week, that was those were different kind of conscious business structures, and that's on a recording, so you can watch that recording. And the second one is about raising conscious capital. And that's what, and Francesco, can you just give us just a couple sentences about why you decided to focus your practice on conscious businesses?
Well, it was my background was as a, when I was working at large law firms, I was working with relatively larger businesses and financial institutions and so forth, and it kind of wasn't a great fit for me. And partly in connection with going to USM, I branched out and started working with smaller businesses and entrepreneurs and smaller tech startups and so forth. And I found that working with these kind of inspired, passionate, highly creative people and helping with the work of building a business, it was some of the most creative. These were some of the most creative people I'd ever worked with. They were all passionate, and the relationships were just a lot more fulfilling to me as an attorney. Then what happened really over time is that entrepreneurial culture and business culture, has undergone in recent years a very pronounced shift in the direction of impact and social enterprise. There's just a lot more concern about that. That's reflected in the conscious capitalism movement. And then that also began being reflected in the law, in terms of the introductions of new corporate forms that were geared specifically to mission-driven and impact entrepreneurs and social enterprises. So the legal world started developing these innovations targeting this market, and it was just very natural for me to I was real interested in them. It was my own orientation, my community was interested in it, so I just started gravitating towards developing that expertise, and the kinds of businesses I began working with because of all those reasons my client base became more and more impact oriented.
And Jenny, how about you? Did you have a similar path, or did something happen to change? Because it sounds like you've been involved for a long time. You've done some really entrepreneurial things as well, in addition to your law practice.
Yeah, so when I graduated from law school, I didn't want to go work for a big corporate law firm. I knew I wanted to do something that would be, an impactful type of work, and I didn't really know what the heck I was going to do, to be honest with you. So that's why I went and got a master's degree in city planning right after law school. And luckily for me, I was able to get a job at a nonprofit organization in Oakland, and it was an incredibly entrepreneurial nonprofit. So it was doing social enterprise from the nonprofit side. And then after being there I started a bunch of businesses there. It was really, really fun. And then after I left there, I joined a law firm that was focused on social enterprise and started focusing more on the for-profit side of doing social enterprise. And the thing is it's almost gotten to a point where the for-profit nonprofit distinction has almost become irrelevant, because a lot of nonprofits are becoming so much more entrepreneurial, and a lot of for-profits are becoming so much more focused on impact and purpose, that the job for lawyers now is to figure out how do we adapt the structures that exist, which, to be honest, haven't totally caught up to all the new things that are happening, and just make sure that our clients have the right structure to achieve their goals.
That's great. And I think what makes you both a powerful team is a couple things. One is your alignment on your working with these type of organizations, because I think it's a very unique growing area. And I think especially when you have a growing area in law, you want to make sure that you're abreast of all these. So the fact that you both are fully into this, I think, speaks a lot to what the value can bring. As well as, Francesco, I know you have sort of the working with the larger organizations, like we said, and Jenny working with some of the smaller organizations. I know there's crossover, but it's great to have both of that. It's great to have both of that as complementary type backgrounds as well.
Oh yeah, it's been and it's been thrilling for me to be working with Jenny because of that. I think our backgrounds are so complementary, and her experience. To Jenny's credit, she's been in the impact space far longer than I have, really from the start of her career, and has really worked with a huge number of what I would say are, the kinds of companies that you wouldn't necessarily associate with doing public offerings and raising capital through, stock and preferred and common stock offerings, and Jenny's pioneered a lot of that, whereas I come from the background of companies that are, higher growth trajectory companies that are working with technology companies, getting angel and venture financings and things like that. And so I think, together, it's nice to be able to offer really all types of businesses, all types of entrepreneurs a pathway for accessing growth capital. And that's really, our central goal here is to communicate that, there is no typical business that is, for raising money. And with the kind of the incredible sort of ecosystem and landscape out there today, there's a tremendous number of options for entrepreneurs. And so hopefully we'll cover a lot of that today.
Let's jump into that stuff. So, we're going to talk, here's our agenda, and we're going to start out with a myth versus a reality, because it's important to understand that, and it's going to set the stage. We're going to talk about capital raising options. We're going to talk about all the different options out there, and there's a lot of them. And then what I really like is we're going to talk about, Jenny and Francesco are going to talk about examples. Here's ones that they worked with in the last short period of time, and why they chose those financing options. Because to me, when I learned these different options, I want to understand how they work in practicality. And if you're out there, if you're looking for capital, I think that'll help you connect the dots even better. Or if you have money to raise, to invest, which bucket you fit in. Then we're going to there's some really important things to understand about security law, and then securities offering. And then we're going to finish up with crowdfunding and the Jobs Act. So we got a lot of information here. We also want to handle your questions. So again, throw your questions out there, and we'll make sure that they're specifically addressed as we go through here. So we're going to start with a myth. The myth is raising capital means sacrificing control and compromising mission. And so can either of you tell us why this is a myth and what this means? Why do you see this? Why do we bring this up first?
Well, you know, Jenny, and I encourage you to chime in here. And this is, you know, this is what I was alluding to earlier, which I think that the popular narrative about capital raising is dominated these days by Silicon Valley and the narrative of the high growth startup and exit strategies and giving investors huge returns on money and investors being rapacious and wanting money and so forth. And that is the sort of main myth that we want to dispel here, as a means of really encouraging people to move forward confidently with their mission-driven enterprise and with the confidence that there are different alternatives out there. That is, there are people who are mission-aligned investors. There are ways to raise capital that don't require a sacrifice of voting control, for example, or a compromise in mission. And we're going to get into those on this call. And you know, so and Jenny, whatever you want to add to that, please do.
Nope, I think you covered it.
Okay.
Well, maybe Jenny can talk about what the truth is, because we want to be clear that people that is a myth and that people do have different options.
Yeah, well, I think I've been working on tools for raising capital for social enterprises for the past 10 years or so, and I've had clients raise hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars from mission-aligned investors without giving up control and offering returns that VCs would laugh at. So I'm here to attest that it is very possible. I've seen it happen many times with many different kinds of businesses.
Laugh at in a good way or a bad way? The returns are better or worse than they're expecting?
They're returns that VCs would consider very low. However, they're returns that a lot of people are really happy to get. We're talking about the range of maybe 3 to 5% per year. That's what most of my clients tend to offer, without any possibility for a huge multiple upon exit. And we'll be giving some more examples about that very soon.
Okay, interesting. Good. Okay, well let's look at the different capital raising options, because there's a lot of them. So let's just jump in and let's talk about the pluses and minuses of these and which ones people would use in different situations.
Yeah, that sounds good. The purpose of this slide was really to, I think, and the next one as well, is to give a sense of the overall landscape of things and the kind of menu, so to speak. And I think that when to use these and when they're appropriate, it's such a personal and situation-based thing that we'll do our best, but I think the examples that we turn to will probably shed a lot more light on that. So real quickly, the bootstrapping and personal credit sources are an obvious source of funding for a great many businesses, especially at the early stage. Obviously, you have a very robust ecosystem of incubators and accelerators, pitch competitions, and so forth. There's a lot of activity in this space, and anybody that wants to contact me, I could send lists of these kinds of resources that are now increasingly focused on social enterprise, impact-driven companies, and these are great ways to connect with mentors, potential financiers, and other expertise and resources. The next category is what we're generally calling investment offerings, and that is, basically selling a security or an interest in your business to investors. So this can take, this is what we're going to be focusing on for the bulk of the rest of this webinar, which is the different types of options that are available to founders to sell kind of stock and debt instruments to different types of investors. So this could be like friends and family rounds of investors, to people in your inner circle, to much broader offerings, to a wider base of investors, to your entire community, for example, and so forth. And so an investment offerings is a broad category. So we'll go into the different types of those a little bit later on.
Okay.
And is there another slide, Mike? That's
yeah. I just want to ask some questions here, because I think I've heard a lot of terms out there, and I just want to make sure that these terms are linked to which ones, so that I understand and make sure everybody out there can understand. So bootstrapping basically means you use whatever money you personally, if you're the owner, use whatever money you personally have, or your personal credit, like your personal credit card. Would that be right?
Yeah, or yes, that that is using, and that could be using savings, using income from other sources, using your personal credit cards, but also organic growth, that is using sales, sales revenues to self-finance the business and grow organically.
Yes, and that's very common for very, very small companies, right? Really startup type companies.
Yeah, exactly, it is. For companies that are looking to do things at scale, that very quickly becomes pretty limiting.
And incubators, because I know what an incubator is, but how is that tied? Because that's like a big office that you have your organization in. What do you mean by capital raising in incubators?
Well, a lot of times, a lot of times the incubators come associated with some form of access to like pitches, or like structured programs that culminate in a kind of pitch, or that part of what they do for companies is at least make the potential, there's the potential there of access to capital as part of the community. It's the same with accelerators. Those two terms are kind of used interchangeably, but it's more typical that an accelerator will come associated with capital.
Gotcha. And we've been seeing more and more competitions out here everywhere, I think, especially, I mean, Jenny, up in Northern California, competitions are all over the place, aren't they?
Yeah.
And who would you suggest works on with competitions?
I have to admit I don't follow those so much. There's lots of different competitions out there. Different ones designed for different things. I know there's one organized by someone named Ian Fisk, whose name the name of the competition I can't think of right now, which I know is focused on social enterprises. But yeah, we really want to talk about the investment offerings today, because I think we both think that those are they tend to be the best way to raise money if you need a fairly large amount, like a few $100,000 minimum. Most competitions are going to be a smaller amount, and also a lot of work.
Yeah, and as I understand, competitions are
it's true. I mean, it's really for
very early stage companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, very much so.
And so friends and family, we hear a lot about, that is an investment offering under private offerings, correct?
Yeah, I was just telling Francesco I'm not a huge fan of the term friends and family, because it means a lot of different things to different people. I like to be a little bit more specific. I usually like to use the term private offering, where you might include, and private offerings can be made to lots of different kinds of people. You might make it to family members, you might make it to friends, you might make it to angel investors. So I feel like the term friends and family isn't always super helpful. But yeah, if you're at an early stage and you happen to be lucky enough to have friends and family with money, they can make you loans at an early stage, and obviously that's great. But so many people I talk to, they kind of get turned off when you say friends and family, because they're like, well, I don't have any friends and family that have money, so I need some other options.
Right. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
and I think it's a good point. What I'd add on that is that I think that the words friends and family are kind of unfortunate, and to my mind, what they point to is that a lot of times these, a lot of times business owners and entrepreneurs are, they're, to me, it means friends and family means your inner circle, and that includes your professional inner circle. That is the people who know you and have some experience with your character, your level of skill, and so because they know you, they're betting on you, and the personal relationship is what's driving it, and that to me is the essence of a friends and family round. It's using your inner circle, not just family, not just friends, but also the people in your professional community.
Yeah. And that can even go to second and third degree relationships, because when you start talking to people in your community, they like what you're doing, they might say, oh, I have a friend that you should definitely talk to. So
yeah. Definitely.
Perfect. And then we'll go more into public and private offerings in a little while, and we just wanted to talk about these other ones as well quickly.
Yeah, Jenny, you want to take these?
Sure. So, a lot of people have heard of crowdfunding. Up until now, there's been a lot of crowdfunding platforms where you cannot offer an investment opportunity. So if you went on Kickstarter and tried to offer people the opportunity to lend you money or buy stock, that would be illegal. They would take it down immediately. So all you can do on those platforms is offer some kind of a perk in exchange for what people are giving you. But there's also lending platforms like Prosper.com and Lending Club where they've gone through all the securities compliance requirements that make it possible for you to actually offer the opportunity to make a loan to you. So that's another option. And then there's some other crowdfunding portals that we'll talk about a little bit more where you actually can offer an investment opportunity. And more coming soon. Oh, I'll go on. Okay, so microlending. So there are some nonprofits out there that specialize in making small loans to small businesses. So, if you need help, we can send you a list of those. Also, foundations, which mostly make grants. There are some foundations that are starting to make investments as well in social enterprises. That still isn't very common, but it's definitely something to keep your eyes out for. And then public markets is basically, there's different ways to define that, but I would say that's when you actually go out and do an IPO, which is something that it happens for very few companies. And that's when you go ahead and list on a public stock exchange. And then bank financing, of course, that's really hard to get for a lot of small businesses.
Would line of credit be?
Yeah, that last bullet point is really for obviously.
Yeah, is a line of credit considered bank financing?
If it comes from a bank, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, and you said you don't see much, for example, micro lending out there or foundation type things that are sort of ancillary?
The microlending it's a good source. There are nonprofits out there that are set up really to help small businesses, and they make loans of maybe $10,000 to $50,000. So that can be a really good source. But if you need several $100,000, it's not going to be a good source.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so tell us about. I really like the fact that we have these examples out here. So give us some. Talk about some of the experiences you've had and how that relates.
Yeah, I could. The first couple of bullet points are my clients, and one of the points I want to make real quick is that as you get specific about your idea, about your business, or as your business develops from idea into an operating company, then there are funding sources that are very particular to industries, for example, and to the location that your business is based in, or the types of business, the clients that you're serving, and so forth. And so, in a way, this is we're just scratching the surface almost in this one hour kind of offering. So I just want to make it clear that there are a lot of additional resources. So with these two, and later I'll explain a little bit more what I'm talking about, but You know, my most recent offerings were both kind of private placements. One is an e-learning platform, and you know, the entrepreneur had built it out for some initial clients, and the initial clients loved what he was doing, and they became investors. Those were convertible note offerings. And then these are mission-driven entrepreneurs. One was creating a really cutting-edge fashion label using all sustainably sourced materials, vegan materials, no leather, and so forth. And she offered preferred membership interests in her company. The other entrepreneur is a software entrepreneur in the education space, and did a convertible note offering, again, to her inner circles. And we turn it over to Jenny to talk about some of the more community-based offerings.
What is a convertible?
Yeah, so something I've really specialized in for the past...
I was just going to ask, what is a convertible note?
Well, a convertible note is it's a type of security where the investor gives a sort of bridge loan to the company. It's a loan that's outstanding for like let's say like a year or two. Generally, it's a pretty short period of time that becomes stock at a later point in time. And there are lots of good reasons to do these kinds of bridge financings, especially that the negotiations involved tend to be simpler because you don't have to talk about all the issues associated with what percentage of the company they're getting and the legal terms associated with a stock offering. So it's a fairly common funding vehicle. It's very common in for example, the technology world. But it's another option, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on that.
Okay, no,
just know it tends to be like more streamlined and efficient.
Okay, that's good to know. And the e-learning platform, they gave an offering to their clients. Is that correct? Their customers.
Yeah, their customers were so enthusiastic about the product, and they just were like, well, we want to get involved on this other level.
Yeah, that's very cool to hear. Okay, go ahead, Jenny. I just want to get clarification, just really understand, so everybody knows all these different options out there. So yeah. Sorry,
yeah, I mean,
Jenny,
we could easily do this for 3 hours, so we're trying to go kind of fast. But so something I've been specializing in for the past 10 years or so is something called a direct public offering. And this is something that a lot of people don't know is legal. There's been some confusion over the past few years that many people have said incorrectly that, oh, it's illegal to make a public offering where you do public advertising of securities. And it's actually not true. There are legal ways to do that, and that's what I've been really focusing a lot of my attention on for the past 10 years or so. So here's just a few examples, and anyone who's interested, I can send a lot more examples. And the interesting thing about these, and really any type of compliance strategy, is it's quite agnostic about what you offer in the offering. So if you do a direct public offering, aka a DPO, you can offer any kind of security you want. So you could do a convertible note, like Francesco was referring to. You could do a straight note where people are just lending you money for a certain term. You could do equity. So here's just three examples of some of my clients that have done these. So People's Community Market was a startup grocery store in Oakland. They didn't even have a location yet. And they tried to raise money by going to a lot of pitch competitions with impact investors, and they got nowhere because it just wasn't a good fit. Impact investors, even though they want impact, they also want relatively low risk and relatively high returns, and a grocery store was not something they were interested in for that, especially one that hadn't even opened yet. So they did a direct public offering in California, and they raised over $1 million. They're actually doing another one now, so in the end, they'll probably end up raising about $2 million. And what they offered was preferred stock with a 3% annual dividend, but no promise to actually pay the dividend for 7 years, because they knew that because they're just starting out, they won't have any profits to pay dividends for quite a while. And then when people want to exit, people will be able to get their money back out via selling their stock back to the company for the same amount that they originally invested. And there's no voting rights. So this is just such a great example of how you can sell equity in your company without giving up control and without offering returns that are going to just make it really difficult for you to operate, because you're giving pretty much all your money to the investors.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Who did they offer this to? Did they offer it to the people in the neighborhood? Did they offer it to institutional people? Who did they?
California residents. So any California resident could invest. So the investors were really diverse. The minimum investment amount was $1,000. So some people that invested were just regular folks in the neighborhood. It's in a low-income neighborhood, so some of the neighbors couldn't afford $1,000, so they actually invested by buying a gift card for the store. But yeah, and then others came in at $25,000, $50,000, more institutional type investors that wanted to come in and support. So it was a really diverse investor base. They ended up with, I think, over 100 investors. Farm Fresh to You is a business that's been around for a long time in California. Unlike People's Community Market, that's a startup, they've been around for, I think, about 10 years, and they deliver produce to customers throughout California. And they did a direct public offering where they raised several $1,000,000 as well. Any California resident could invest, and they really targeted it towards their customers, so they put advertising for it in the delivery boxes. And what they offered was a note. So the investors would lend them money, and actually they paid the interest in the form of credit towards product instead of cash. And the interest was 3.5% per year. And if you decided to opt out of that and say, you know what, I'm moving to another state where you don't deliver produce, I want cash instead, they said that's fine, but then the interest rate goes down to 2.5%.
Well, that's very creative. That's really, really creative.
Yeah. Really cheap capital for them, so they just keep raising money that way year in, year out. And then Quimper Mercantile is one in Washington State that was a startup. It's a retail store, and they offered common stock, and what they offer does have voting rights associated with it, but they have over 1,000 investors, so they considered a community-owned store, and the minimum investment was only $100. So they were able to raise about $750,000, and that allowed them to open the store.
Got it.
So there's many more examples, and I'm happy to send people, a list of all the other ones that I've worked on if they want more info. And there's actually several that are currently open to investors. So if there are any investors on the line, most of them, the minimum investment is only $1,000.
Great. And if people do have questions, just to let everybody know that we will be sharing Francesco's contact info. So if you do have more detailed questions or you want some of these lists that Jenny and him are mentioning, you will get that opportunity at the end. We got a couple of questions. We're going to handle the questions right after as we do some more of these examples, but Jenny and Francesco are on a roll, so we're going to have you keep going through these.
Okay, this next example, it's actually Our Harvest Co-op, OUR.
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't clear when I said it. So they're based in Cincinnati, and it's a worker co-op, and so it's very important for them not to give up any control or voting rights so that the workers stay in control of the co-op. And what they do is they grow and deliver produce, similar to Farm Fresh to You. And they're one of my clients that chose not to do a direct public offering because, to be honest with you, a direct public offering does require a few more legal hoops that you need to jump through compared to a private offering. So they're doing a private offering, but in some ways it's similar to a direct public offering because they're talking to their community, and the minimum investment is only $1,000. They cannot do public advertising, but they're having lots of one-on-one conversations with community members, and it's a similar offering where there's no voting rights, and there's an annual dividend paid, and there's no possibility for a big multiple on exit that would pressure them to sell the business because they don't want to have to sell the business. And they're raising several $100,000 this way. As long as you're not raising more than $1 million, you can do a private offering without having, and bring in both wealthy and non-wealthy investors.
Gotcha. And so the difference between private and public is mainly you can advertise a publicly, and private would have to be more the one-on-one conversations.
Exactly.
Good.
Oh, so a couple of final examples. A healthcare, early stage healthcare company that I'm working with that focused on the low-income community and delivering primary care to a low-income community. Initial funding came from the founder and a small business loan, and we have been in contact with a number of funding sources that are really focused on businesses that are located and serving these lower income areas. And so there's a lot of opportunities that for businesses that work with lower income populations and in lower income communities. There are community banks, there are government sources, government credits, foundations, the foundation PRI, Venture Philanthropy. A number of foundations have PRI options that are for businesses that serve these lower income communities. So we are cultivating these relationships, and they've expressed interest once there's greater traction and revenue in funding the business. So I thought that was a worthy example to highlight. This other technology startup, virtual reality startup, The Inventor, has got a grant to bring this sort of virtual reality hardware concept. It's really a hardware-software concept because it has such a strong educational potential and component. Got some foundation grant money. That is like no strings attached money to develop the technology. So again, I think this just points to that, depending on your idea, there may be some really specific opportunities that match and fit what you're trying to do.
That's great. Scott asked, how you doing, Scott, by the way? Good to hear, nice to hear from you. Do you have any examples of service-based organizations that have raised money, and is there any difference? Because I think a lot of these, if not all of them, are product-based, a lot of them retail as well, on the service side.
Yes, I did it myself. And I've had a few clients. So when I was CEO of Cutting Edge Capital was basically a consulting firm, a B2B consulting firm. And we used the direct public offering model to raise money. We raised several $100,000. So I have had a few clients do that. I think as long as your message is really powerful in terms of how you're making a difference in the world, it's not extremely hard to raise money using a direct public offering because the minimum investment can be so low. You're not asking people to put their life savings in, so you end up with a larger number of smaller investors, and it's actually not so. I've never had a client fail when using that model, and I've had clients in many different industries, food and manufacturing and B2B services and B2C services and everything.
Okay.
Nonprofits, even nonprofits do it.
So the fact of being a service-based company, like not having inventory and such, really doesn't have a big effect, or it does have some effect on things?
No, I'd say no effect.
Okay. Lee asked, and I don't know if we're going to be able to do it for all of them, but if you can touch, I know we're going to go through some of we're going to dig some deeper here. If you can touch a little bit on the regulatory compliance and legal fees for the different structures as well. Because I know that's such a straightforward question.
The fees.
Fees.
We should talk one-on-one about that. Give us a call.
Yeah. So I mean,
look,
well, as we're going
through these,
as we're going through these, if you could just give some ideas, because I think some have a lot of regulatory requirements, and the fees are quite, like the initial public offering is not a cheap thing. It has a lot of regulatory, but personal bootstrapping has a very small amount and not much regulatory. I think we're just looking for economies of scope around some of these.
hmm Yeah, and it really does vary a lot depending on what you're offering, how many states you're offering it in, how much you're raising, whether, what type of entity you formed. So it's a little hard to generalize, but we could try.
Okay. Well, I think that's great. You gave us some, just knowing, I never even thought of how many different states, because I guess all states have different requirements. That's a big issue. The amount,
Yeah.
like you said, are good litmus tests for the complexity and the overall cost and regulation. So that's helpful. Good. All right, understanding the basics of security law. So we're going to get a little Yale Harvard education here. Awesome.
I didn't learn any of this at Yale. Learned it much later, but yeah, I'll run through this really quickly. So a lot of people don't even know about securities law at all. And then some people do know about it, but have a lot of misconceptions about it. So I'll just give a really quick background. So if you're offering a security to anyone, and a security is really broadly defined, it's basically any type of offering of an opportunity for someone to invest in your business. So it could be equity, it could be debt, it could be a promise to pay $110 a year from now in exchange for $100 now. Anything where someone is getting a return on their investment is a security. And the minute you're offering a security, no matter how you're doing it, whether you're offering it to a friend, your parents, the public, etc., it is going to be covered by securities law. And the general rule is that any securities offering has to be registered both at the federal level with the Securities and Exchange Commission and in every state where you're making the offering as well. Now, there are a lot of exceptions to that. Very few people do a full federal registration. When you do that, that's when you're doing an IPO. So what Francesco and I do is when we work with clients, we figure out which state and federal exemptions apply to your particular situation. And a lot of lawyers, if you talk to a corporate lawyer, a lot of times they'll tell you that the only way to really avoid these regulatory hurdles is if you limit your offering to accredited investors. And that's an investor with at least $1 million in net worth, excluding their primary residence, $200,000 in annual income, or if it's an entity, $5 million in assets. And what we found over the years is that's really not true. There are many ways to fit into an exemption and still be able to include both accredited and unaccredited investors. So that's kind of a big message that I like to share with people is because a lot of people, when you tell them you've got to only talk to accredited investors, they get a little defeated because they may not know any, or they may talk to some and find that what those investors are looking for isn't really a fit with what they're trying to do with their business.
Okay, good. Do we skip a slide? Oh, I think we did a little bit, but I think we went over that, right? Good. All right, now do we want to hit categories of security offerings?
Yeah, so the categories of securities offerings are basically they emerge from this kind of the regulatory requirements that Jenny was just alluding to. That is, depending on which type of exemption or whether you're going to register will determine the category of offering that you're trying to reach. I mean, and it's the category. It depends on what category is right for your business. Depends on how much you're raising, who you want to raise the money from, and how you intend to promote the offering. Both whether it's to wealthy and non-wealthy people, and whether it's going to be within a single state or across state lines and so forth. All of those factors and considerations will be really significant in terms of determining how to structure the offering and what the compliance requirements are to do it. So the simplest, most straightforward from a regulatory point of view type of securities offering is what's these targeted, non-advertised private placements that are generally targeted to sophisticated purchasers. That is, especially when you're raising less money, that's not necessarily a requirement that they be accredited investors and meet those particular income and net worth hurdles. But a lot of times, as Jenny was alluding to, companies will stick to accredited investors because it's because there are more security exemptions that are that you can fall within when you limit it, but there are as Jenny was pointing, offerings, limit your offerings to accredited investors only. So as long as you're kind of not advertising and you're below a certain dollar threshold and you're cognizant of where you're raising the funds, these private offerings encompass angel financings, venture financings, what we friend and family financing meaning capital raised from your inner circle and from private individual and people who want to participate in your business. So that's what we're calling, quote, private offerings.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to talk about the types of broader public offerings that that are available as well.
And just so I'm clear, private offerings can be debt or stock, right? They can be loans or.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the definition of what is, as Jenny was saying, what a security is very broad. It's really like any type of contract or instrument that entitles someone to some return on funds from your business. Can even be like a percentage of revenue type of arrangement, depending on what it looks like.
Yeah.
All right, and if we talk more about this public offerings, yeah, Jenny, get some feedback on this.
Yeah, so this kind of brings us to the Jobs Act, which many people have heard about. And I was involved in, as you said, in what ultimately became the Jobs Act, so I've followed it quite a bit since we first started working on it back in 2010, and then it was signed into law in 2012. And the Jobs Act actually contained 3 big new options for raising money. So this number 2, public offerings to accredited investors, was one of the 3 new things that became available under the Jobs Act, and we call it Rule 506C, as in cat. And it actually allows you to publicly advertise your offering as long as all the investors that you ultimately bring in are accredited, and you have to verify that they really are accredited. And there have sprung up quite a few platforms like AngelList and CircleUp where you can do this type of offering. So that's another one. And then there's public offerings, which I kind of talked about before and gave some examples, where you can bring in both accredited and unaccredited investors. And that's what I call a direct public offering. So any type of offering where you can have both accredited and unaccredited investors, and you could do public advertising, I call a DPO. And there's many, many ways to do a DPO, and 2 of the things that were in the Jobs Act actually added 2 new tools for doing DPOs. But even before the Jobs Act, there were ways to do them. So if we're really going to end in 7 minutes, I think I should stop there. But we can get into more detail if we have time.
Okay, and I know you talked a little bit. Did you cover this already? Or did you want to go deeper into this?
Yeah, so the 2 other things other than the one I already mentioned under the Jobs Act, one is called Regulation A+, and Regulation A+ allows you to publicly advertise your offering and actually do it in all 50 states, but you do have to do a fairly extensive filing with the SEC. So if you can raise up to $50 million. So if you're raising several $1 million, probably a minimum of, I'd say, 5 to 10 million, Regulation A+ can be a great option, and that probably costs in the range of $75,000 to $100,000 in terms of compliance costs. That's why you need to be raising a fair amount for it to be worth it. And then the third thing is probably the most famous thing that happened under the Jobs Act, and that's what we call the crowdfunding exemption. Some people call it equity crowdfunding. I don't like calling it that because you could do debt or equity. And that's just about to go into effect. Even though the Jobs Act passed over 3 years ago, it's only now about to go into effect, where there will be portals where you'll actually be able to list an offering and raise up to $1 million on these portals. Unfortunately, there's some problems with that new option that will become available next year. And one is that if you're raising over $100,000, you'll have to have reviewed financials, which you have to pay a CPA to do, and it can cost several $1,000s to do that. There's a few other things about it that are problematic, but it does allow you to offer your securities in all 50 states without having to do a lot of filings, and you could do it more quickly and more cheaply than the other tools that are available.
Great. Okay, and I just want to give everybody, we're just finishing up here with the content, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. We do have one question here that says, that they say, if you are a B Corp, how does that affect raising capital?
It has no legal effect, but it certainly has an effect in terms of your ability to market it. I think there are a lot of people out there that like to invest in B Corps.
Would that be the same for a benefit corporation, like that type of legal corporation?
Yeah, it doesn't have much of a legal effect, except that you are a corporation, so it affects what you can offer if you're offering equity.
Okay. Well, Jim asked a question that says, do you see any new types of offerings? Do you see any new types of offerings that may come in the future? So I guess, do you think there's going to be any changes to these things, or is there anything that states or the federal government are working on?
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is yet another tool that's become available recently that we didn't mention, and that is state-level crowdfunding. About 25 states have actually adopted laws. California hasn't yet, but there are about 25 states where you can do crowdfunding at the state level. But Francesco, do you think there's anything else that'll happen? So much has already happened recently, it's hard to imagine anything else.
Yeah, well, I think there's a tremendous amount of innovation, but there is a lot of experimentation happening. There are social impact bonds and structuring, developing like tiers or tranches of equity that are targeted to financial and impact investors, and so I think that I think this particular sector is evolving very, very rapidly, and like social impact bonds are a way of financing impact, bringing private company investment to impact things that are traditionally done by government, and giving the ability of private investors to fund providers that are reducing government costs and getting a return based on the cost savings. That's an example of like I think just significant innovation that will continue happening.
Well, this is really interesting.
And I think this proliferation of portals that as these new Job Act regs come online, and you basically the crowdfunding, the equity crowdfunding portals or the investment portals, as Jenny was pointing out, have been limited to accredited investors right now. But as these new Job Act regs go into effect in 2016, you're going to have like an enormous base of investors. Basically, everyone that is capable of accessing these online portals and making small investments in different types of businesses. And I think that is going to really, we don't know exactly how it's going to change the small business financing landscape, but I think it's going to be very significant, and there'll be a lot of innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it in the last 100 years. I mean, the market has changed so much in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's in probably an area that hasn't had a lot of change previously. It's really exciting for people and organizations and products and services that are very unique to really get to a place that would have taken them years or even been impossible just a short time ago.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I'm also really confused, so I'm glad people like you are there, because there's a lot of options.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want to leave people with. I mean, to me, that's what I get out of this is there's so many different ways to do it. I mean, there's so many different options available. I think this is just a taste. And Francesco, you were very good, and you can reach Jenny through Francesco through the information you see on the last slide here. But they're both very generous with their time. They both believe in the same cause. They're both involved in the same cause we are. at Conscious Capitalism, just in different cities. Can we have one closing comment? I guess I should say that to attorneys. What's your closing argument for this? But would you like to leave the audience, all the business owners, the capital raisers, and the investors? Can we get a quick closing statement from each of you?
Yeah, my closing sentiment is kind of like, go for it. Yeah, that if you have a vision and you envision being able to generate positive impact, whether it's through a for-profit or a non-profit, get going and just know that there's a very vibrant ecosystem of people that are out there ready to support what you're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I hate to hear of stories of social enterprises that don't know all the options and then either are unable to raise money because they're chasing after stuff that's not a good fit, or even worse, they raise money from someone who's a really bad fit and they end up losing their mission and going off track, and it happens a lot. So just, know the options, be picky, be just as picky as the investors are. What you're offering is not easy to find. There's not a lot of good investments out there, and people want to invest in things that fit their values and with people that have integrity. So you are offering something of huge value, so demand the best investors for yourself.
Yeah, because it's not, it has a lot of implications who you bring in, obviously. We all know that. That's awesome. Thank you both so much for your time. You've been very generous with your knowledge and your time on this. Again, I'm R. Michael Anderson. I'm the president of Conscious Capitalism San Diego. Our website is ccsandiego.org. You probably know that already if you're watching this, but make sure you're signed up on our mailing list to get future webinars. We have a great quarter one. We have a great quarter one planned for you. In January, we're going to be doing a Conscious Capitalism assessment. That's a half day. So your organization, if you want to assess your corporation, see where it stacks up in the consciousness level, this is the workshop for you. So you come and you actually work on what your own organization is doing. We got a guest speaker for February we're working on, and we got Rod Sisodia in March. Thanks to Conscious Capitalism LA, we helped secure him. He spoke at LA, phenomenal guy. He's one of the original authors, if you don't remember, of the book Conscious Capitalism, along with John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods. So we have a really powerful quarter one for you. As always, if you have questions, reach out to Francesco. He has access to Jenny. If you have questions for me on the chapter, it's president@ccsandiego.org. Our information is easy to find. But thank you so much. And just my final note to all the investors and the business people out there, we need more of what you're doing. So if you're watching this, if you have money to give, if you're trying to raise money, just like both Francesco and Jenny said, look, the world needs more of what we're doing. The world needs this to liberate the heroic spirit in business. And it's not going to be the huge companies that does it. It's people like you and I. It's the small, medium-sized companies that really can bring our heart and the innovation into it. So we need you. Go ahead and take the next step. So I'm Michael Anderson. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.